year. As always, I'm going for a few logistical slides, and I'll give a brief intro to Jeremy and Peter, Dr. Abadir, Dr. Walston. I don't think really any introduction, but I'm going to give a brief one, and then we'll go into the actually into the seminar. All right, so logistics, as always. There we go. If you're joining us in person, we'll do a Q&A afterwards. There's closed captioning provided in Zoom for those who are online. The seminar is being recorded. And then if you're already joining by Zoom and there are any questions or concerns, you can chat, and someone's monitoring the chat constantly, or you can directly email. The email address is all being put in the chat right now as well. So this is getting toward the tail end of our seminar series for this year, and we're really thrilled to have Jeremy and Peter here. But I want to mention next month we're having one of our our only virtual, I think, of this year, our second virtual one this year. Alejandro Cabello Lopez, who is known to us through Pablo Martinez, will be talking a virtual talk about some of the work he's been doing around hearing and occupational health. Then in March, we have David Green, who you guys may know. He's actually a social entrepreneur, won the MacArthur Fellowship many years ago for his work pioneering sort of a social enterprise around how you deliver vision care in India, and has been moving a little more into hearing now for the last several years as well. And then finally in April, really excited for our research day. You guys know we've been doing this for several years, but our first in-person one was several years ago, and then went virtual. Last year was sort of a hybrid. This year we're going back fully in person again. We're really excited to have Devet Swempole, who is sort of follows along, I would say, David Green's ilk, where he's an audiologist, really a phenomenal researcher, but also a social entrepreneur, founded a company called HearX now, which may be heard of, which we actually use their products in a lot of our research. He'll be joining us from South Africa. We're mixing up the day. Usually in the past, as you guys may know, in the mornings we had the sort of center faculty giving overview talks of what they've been doing. And then there was a keynote, there was a poster session after with all the trainees, and then dinner that night. This we're mixing up. So the morning talks will be actually not really by core faculty anymore. There'll be just one by Carrie Neiman, who'll be talking about the HEAR study, which is relevant to Devet. But then we're inviting a lot of our collaborators who previously or are working with us right now to deliver talks. So there'll be Justin Galub, who is an ENT surgeon at Columbia, who has developed a sort of a trial which is similar to Achieve, but a little different. We'll be talking about that. Sarah Mamo from UMass Amherst, who was previously one of our fellows here, has been doing a lot of intervention work for how you deliver hearing intervention in the PACE communities, which is basically sort of independent living order adults, but in a sort of a subsidized program run by the government. But how you deliver hearing communication issues, or how you tackle that in the community. And finally, Nicole Maroney, who's coming from University of Arizona, who's focused on how you develop, how you train promotores, community healthcare workers on the Mexico-Arizona border to deliver hearing care. So there's a theme for the research day, which is around sort of intervention, classically outside the box, outside the booth per se, and really then headed up then by Devet for the noon talk. And then you guys will be hearing more about that in the next few weeks, because there'll be registration links going out. It's only going to be in person. We won't record, people can't really make it, but it won't be live stream. It'll be in person only for sort of a whole day of lunch and breakfast and different activities. So stay tuned for that. All right, so I promise I'll give a brief intro, and the reason why I think it's important is because Jeremy, I don't know if you remember, Jeremy was one of the first people I met when I was coming on faculty 13 years ago. And Jeremy, I've always sort of considered to be sort of the godfather of everything geroscience, geriatric related, because Jeremy, you really got me started actually. So Jeremy got me set up at COA, Center on Aging and Health, many years ago when I was looking for an academic home, because I was sort of a black sheep in ENT. I was interested in broader epi and aging. There was no one else doing it, certainly not in ENT. So Jeremy got me started at COA many years ago. I think Jeremy has served in a similar role for many, many other faculty and trainees over the years, as sort of the person, and all roads lead back to Jeremy in many ways. So Jeremy is a professor of geriatric medicine in the Department of Medicine, but in the Division of Geriatrics. He's also the PI of the Order of American Independence Center, which was how I got involved with him through COA many years ago. And now he's also the co-PI with Peter of the Artificial Intelligence and Technology Collaboratory, which we'll hear a lot more about. Peter Abadir, similarly, associate professor of geriatric medicine. I'll say many roads also lead back to Peter over the years too. And Peter, I don't remember, the first time I ever met you was in the basement of Jeremy's house when you had, I think, a holiday party. And it's the first time I met you and your kids. I still remember this, it was like over a decade ago. But I had always heard of your name. I remember being your first time, and your kids were very, very rambunctious. I remember Peter and Jeremy are historically and traditionally based on the Bayview campus, which we hear all about, where a lot of the aging research happens. So we're really thrilled they're willing to come over here and join us in person. Jeremy says it's his first time in this building actually in over 3 years since before the pandemic. So welcome back, Jeremy.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, guys. Thank you, Mindy.
Thank you, Frank. Thanks for inviting us. I think I remember Frank very well from early on because I saw so much potential in his work and how important it was in our older patients, the sort of hearing loss and all the sort of questions related to that and how it connected to the brain and cognitive decline and all sorts of other things. So I spent most of my career working on the syndrome of frailty, which is a late life condition of decline that we have worked to diagnose over the years, and I've sort of used as a research model to figure out some of the biology that underlies frailty and late life decline. So over the years, as Frank mentioned, I've worked to kind of aggregate people together on important topics in aging. And I think the Human Aging Project that I'm going to talk about is really a huge group effort of pulling all sorts of people in from across various schools at Hopkins and focusing on some of the important issues in aging, really in the biological and engineering space for the most part. So first, I'll just a quick big picture of aging, and I'll talk about the Human Aging Project and sort of the biology, engineering, and clinical translation arms of that. And then Peter's going to talk about more of the engineering alliance that has come along in the last couple of years and is really starting to pop as well. So we certainly welcome collaborators, and there's some opportunities that I'll talk about at the end for people to apply to. So as you all know, the worldwide population is rapidly aging across the world. So I don't think I'll really get into that much. But what we've noticed in geriatrics practice for a long time is you see this period of life where people are declining. They're still maybe cognitively intact and maybe starting to have some functional impairment, but we're always trying to figure out what it is that's driving people into this later life stage of being more disabled, more dementia, and sort of loss of independence. So we've come at it from a biologic standpoint and from a more recently an engineering standpoint to try to figure out etiologies, but also to think about care management, treatments, et cetera. So this is a way that we often describe it, that red, the black lines there are the ages of death. You see 1900, the black line, the peak was in the early 70s. And in 2016 for women, it was in the 80s, mid 80s. And that red and pink shaded area is sort of the period of life where people are beginning to have functional and cognitive decline. And what we are trying to do is to try to push that back. So imagine people living out into their 80s and 90s and trying to make sure that they have as much independence and functional capacity, cognitive capacity as possible. We're not trying to get people to live forever, but to help them have a great latter third of life, I guess I would call it. So the Human Aging Project is something we've developed in the last few years. It's really a transdisciplinary multi-school organization that really supports a federation of aging-focused research programs and scholars, students from medicine, public health, engineering, nursing, and increasingly business as well. It's sort of built around these basic pillars of biology, engineering, and clinical translation. So taking biology and biologic discoveries related to aging and figuring out what it is about biologic aging that makes older people get so many illnesses, what makes them drive some of the declines. Same with engineering, more on a sort of a care planning, maybe some diagnostics, but also helping take care of older people in their homes or wherever it might be. The focus really is on healthy aging and sort of improving health span, lifespan, and wellness. So two terms that have emerged in geriatrics and aging research over the recent years. So this geroscience initiative is really focusing on age-related biologic changes and trying to, again, tracking them into preventive or treatment strategies for chronic diseases that are common in older adults, also geriatric syndromes like frailty, sarcopenia, mild cognitive impairment, hearing loss could certainly go into that category because there's probably a lot of common biologic pathways that are driving all of these outcomes that we see. And then gerotech initiatives using AI and engineered technologies to help with diagnostic and also with support for caregiving services. And again, with the eye of improving the health span over time. So we think Hopkins has been uniquely suited to this kind of program, and that we have these translational programs that bridge world-class aging research programs to biology and bioengineering programs. And we've worked to kind of bring that together closely. We have these great partnerships in public health, nursing, business school, and then more recently, business partners and the Johns Hopkins Tech Ventures group, which is down the street here. Eager to work and invest in these spaces. We found that there's been a lot of interest from the community and from venture capitalists, and to try to kind of get into the space because they see the potential of some of these areas of investigation. So we're at Bayview again, which is on Eastern Avenue, about 2 miles from here. And really, it's been the home of geriatric medicine. Almost all of the aging clinical work is done there, and also a lot of the research that we do in biology and increasingly in engineering. We're probably going to have a new facility over there in the next few months. And then connecting these things to patient populations. We have a big registry of about 600 older people that volunteer for studies. They come in for a whole range of things, and we tried to bring them together there. And this is just a high-level view of it. The hospital is there. There's all these different programs, from the Human Aging Project to the Biology of Healthy Aging Program, Education Center, Memory and Alzheimer's Disease Treatment Center, PACE program, which has older people coming in from the community for like a daycare center where they get lots of healthcare and other support, and many other programs. And importantly, at the top there, you see that biggest building, that's the National Institute on Aging. They have their program, intramural program on the Bayview campus. So a huge group of scientists, lab-based scientists, clinical scientists working there and collaborating. Many of them are in the division of geriatrics with us. So just again, big picture of the kinds of work we're doing in the Human Aging Project. So we've been really lucky to get all of these big grants over the years. And so I've underlined the areas that we've been able to kind of pull together. So the Pepper Center that Frank talked about, the focus is on frailty, trying to figure out what the underpinnings are of frailty and how to better manage it. So that's the Older Americans Independent Center. And again, the focus is on frailty. Resiliency is another one. So we've been trying to identify what characteristics make some people, older people, respond better to treatments, to clinical treatments. So imagine an 80-year-old coming in for a stressful medical procedure, like a surgery, a knee replacement surgery, for example. And some people do really well afterwards, and some people do really poorly. And we're trying to figure out what the biologic differences are so we can kind of head off some of that stuff. So that's a big grant in that area. Peter will tell you about the AITC. We have a group that's working on vaccines. They did a lot of work during COVID and trying to figure out why it is that older people don't respond as well to COVID vaccines or to influenza vaccines, why they get sicker when they actually get the viruses, what's different about their immune system. So that's another big area. And then working with folks on the Homewood campus of bioengineers, thinking about cell shape. So imagine as cells age, they change their shape, and it actually really changes the way they function. So it's not just that they're older, there's some modifications happening in some of the proteins. They kind of, I think, like they're kind of wrinkling up in a way that, and the genes that get expressed out of them become very different. And so that grant is focused on trying to understand them better. And then we have a training program as well. So this launched in 2021. I mentioned Sean's Center on Aging and Immune Remodeling, the HAP Scholars, which is a program for mid-career faculty, Gerotech incubators that Peter will talk about, and the AITC. The HAP Scholars, just as an example of the kinds of people and science we're supporting. You see this kind of wide variety of people from medicine, engineering, nursing. The top row there, like Alex, for example, is working on Parkinson's disease, but we see a lot of similarities as people age. Their gait becomes a little bit more Parkinsonian. You probably have noticed Joe Biden walking, and he's got a little bit of a shuffling gait, and he doesn't have any full-blown signs of Parkinson's that are obvious to somebody watching, but there's probably some aging-related changes that are similar. So Alex is helping us think through that and maybe ways to help prevent some of the gaits that make people more likely to fall, for example. Rasika is a great genetic epidemiologist with a joint appointment in public health, and she's really an expert at pulling together all these omic platforms, so metabolomic, proteomic, genomic data, and sort of making sense out of it in a complex disease states, but increasingly related to aging. Thomas Kuja is working on social isolation in older adults and how that changes their biology and makes them more vulnerable. And then the bottom row there, nursing, medicine, and engineering. These three are working on the Gerotech initiative that Peter will tell you about. And then the newest scholars, Esther O works on delirium, Hiromi Sasaki works on mitochondrial biology here on this campus, and Sean Lang, I mentioned about the vaccine studies. So this is really not all that relevant, but we are working towards getting this new engineering space and some new foundation money to really boost up some of the biologic studies. And I'd be happy to come back and talk more about that. But importantly, the new engineering programs, and that's probably where there's the most overlap with the things that you all are thinking about and working on. And Peter, I'm going to turn it over to Peter to talk about that. We've got these programs, a nice big grant to help us roll this out, and we were very lucky we got this along with UMass and UPenn for the first 3 awards in the country. So, Peter.
Thank you, Dr. Lin, for inviting us, and honored to be with you here. As you have seen, I am a geriatrician. I'm a clinician trained in taking care of older adults. I also have a second appointment in the School of Engineering. Have absolutely zero credentials in the School of Engineering, but it sounds cool. And I told my dad, who was an engineer, how hard could it be? I'm now a professor in the School of Engineering, and I didn't even need to go through the School of Engineering. So I'll tell you how I got there. And I want to start first by putting this picture in your heads. Have you guys seen redwood trees before? Redwood trees are the tallest trees on earth, 35 stories high. And as an engineer, I can tell you that in order to build a building that high, you need 1/3 in foundation. So you need whatever, 5, 6 stories down in foundation. But truth is, those redwood trees have only roots that are 5 to 6 feet deep. So how do they stay standing? You will never see a redwood tree solo. They always come together. So it's a tribe of redwood trees. They build their strength from the roots. They intertwingle, they come together, and they support each other, providing strength to each other. And this is exactly what we're trying to achieve here in the Human Aging Project. And this is what's relevant to this presentation, is that we would love to build that interconnected network of redwood trees. Clinical geriatrics doesn't have to have all the engineering and hearing and everything done in geriatrics, but our strength is from working with you. And so with that, I will highlight things that would love to see more from you coming to that, to work with us on that. So as Jeremy mentioned, during the past 100 years, we have seen increased number of older adults that are living to middle of their 80s and 90s. And with that gain on the lifespan frontier came some opportunities, and I'll call them opportunities because as the longer they live, that we started to see more syndromes that comes with aging, with living longer, incontinence, frailty, multimorbidities, polypharmacy. You see a lot of medications, transitions of care, lifestyle, social isolation, you name it. Those are all areas that are fertile and ready to put a lot of work on. On the other side, there was an explosion of AI and technologies, and somehow there was no direct flow from the capillary, from the venous to the arterial side. We're using this figure to show that even though that there is a capillary network, but blood flow doesn't organically happen. And why is that? Because of many reasons. First is that clinicians, geriatricians in Bayview, you guys live here, engineers live in Homewood campus. The crosstalk doesn't happen organically. So this is one reason that this doesn't occur. Others, unrealistic expectations. We think engineers can build anything, and that's not true. Impractical technologies, and I'll use a quick example. So this is an example from the advanced physics lab. They were showing this thermometer that can measure body temperature to the 7th decimal. And as a clinician, this sounds interesting, but completely irrelevant. I mean, I don't even know what to do with the 97. So to give me 6 digits after that, I don't even know what to do with it. So those are kind of things that we try to avoid when we bring teams to work together. So this artificial intelligence and technology collaboratory is one of 3 centers nationwide. We are here at Hopkins. The second is in UPenn and more focused on dementia. And the third is in UMass, and this is more industry and technology build-up platform. It's as the goal, the overarching goal of the AITC is exactly Red Web Tree metaphor. Build an ecosystem, allow redwoods from different schools, engineering, nursing, medical school to come, Carey Business School to come together and build that system that allows us all to serve older adults. Why? And this is more important because there is nothing more noble than serving older adults. So this is the rationale for building this. Bring everybody and put them to develop new technologies. This is a huge deviation from previous NIA efforts to put grants. NIA in general is risk evasive. They don't want to put any risk. In order to get a grant, you need to prove by 95% that everything is going to work exactly how you told them that's going to work. And I said, we tried that, we want something different. We want technologies now. In 2 to 5 years, we want to see more stuff in the market for the service of older adults, which is this, you have to take a huge risk in order to get that accomplished. So this is the basic. Our center, the 3 co-PIs, myself, Jeremy, and Dr. Rama Shalapa, who is described as the father of AI. Dr. Shalapa was talking about artificial intelligence back in the 70s when people didn't even know what computers were. So this is an exaggeration, but to that extent. Our center has 8 cores, and those cores are directed by a clinician and an engineer. Each core, most of the cores are directed by a clinician and engineer to be true to the principle that we want both the clinical and engineering aspects in each of those cores. And I'll take you quickly, but you can see some of our colleagues and faculty from the School of Medicine and the School of Engineering, and I'll go through them in one minute. I want to show this figure because it's important that to see the structure and that we built the AITC to go through the different cores, and I'll take you through the process of finding a problem to developing a pilot, because I think this is relevant to you when you start thinking about how can I work with the AITC. This, you will find this very helpful later on. But we have basically the pilot cores A and B. A is Alzheimer's dementia, and pilot core B is aging. We have a networking and mentoring core led by Dr. Phil Fan, who is a Carey Business School professor, technology identification and training core led by Alicia Arbahi and Dr. Matthias, who's an engineer, data integration and quality. All technologies have data component in it. So the idea that any technology to be developed have to speak one language so that in 5 years from now, we have no issues with data harmonization. NIA is going through a lot of trouble now to try to make proteomics talk to metabolomics, to talk to physiomics, whatever it is. So in order to be ahead of the game, we need to develop this one language that everything feeds into. Stakeholder engagement core, led by Dr. Nancy Schonborn and Thomas Kuju, who is basically driving the initial selection of areas of importance to work on. And I'll go through that in a second. I direct with Dr. Ramesh Lava, the clinical translation and validation. I'll show you in a few seconds. We work with multiple centers, and this is just an example of some of the centers. I would love to have the Cochlear Center there. We work with the Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, the Older American Independence Center, the Office of Rural Health, because in different parts. So Iowa is one of those rural health centers that are part of our AITC, because the NIA stated clearly, we don't want an academic experiment. We want real stuff that is can be used in rural America as well. Robotics, sensations, language of speech and processing, the Malone Center, lots of centers contributed to this. And what are we looking for? So technologies, basically, we use vague terms, technologies that will help increase independence of older adults. It can move from diagnostics, so early identification of older adults, to patient care and engagement, to caregiving and workforce, and this is emphasized in our goals of the center, to system management and administration. So things, if you think of designing a place that is more friendly for older adults so that they can achieve their goals of independence, that's part also of the interest of the center. So those are the two cores. I want to take you through this and bear with me as I explain this. So the first thing is that Alicia Arbahi and Dr. Nancy Schonborn and Thomas Kuju will get together with key stakeholders. Key stakeholders are patient advocacy groups, representatives from different disease organizations, Alzheimer's disease, any of those organizations that are focused on older adults, groups of advocacy in the country, and come up with a list of things that are really important for older adults. Rank them and start building our areas of interest. In the first RFA, those are the areas we want to see new technologies developed for older adults. This moves to the second core. So once we come up with that list and identify top areas that we want to see in the first year, moves to the technology identification and training core. This is led by Dr. Alicia Arbahi, a geriatrician, and Dr. Matthias, who is an engineer, and their goal is that they will take the first list and identify new AI technologies that can be married to that list. Not only that, but identify engineers, companies, clinicians that work in those areas. So create a database that allow us to keep building our troops. Then we move to sending a request for proposal. This is the areas we are interested in, some of the technologies that we would love to see developed more. Goes through the admin core, request for proposal goes nationwide, and then we score and rescore the applications to identify winning applications. A winning application can be going to physical aging, which is frailty, directed by Dr. Walston and Dr. Suchi Saria, or Alzheimer's disease, directed by Dr. Najim Dehak and Dr. Quincy Samos and Dr. Esther O. Those are real world pilots. What about technologies that are not yet very well developed? Well, there's something called clinical translation validation. You have an idea. You have something that looks promising, but it's not ready yet for piloting. We have in-house studio that we use to develop the new technologies for older adults. And currently, we're working with Dr. Lin to put hearing as part of that in-house studio. So I will show you some of the very, very early development of that in-house studio. We work in extensive networks. We have the School of Public Health. We have also Career Business School really involved, because any technology, if you think about it, that if you want this to go in the market in 2 to 5 years, finances, market analysis, development, all that has to be figured out early on. So we have consulting teams that work on that. I talked about the precision medicine analytic platforms. All the technologies have to be able to connect to the common data, and Dr. Chris Shute has been instrumental in driving that harmonization of data. A lot of speech and robotics and sensing, so I'll spare you the details, but I'll give you some examples of the interest, how thirsty is the field for working for older adults. So when we sent the first RFA application and the second, so far we had 2 rounds of applications, accepted and funded few of them. UMass got 146, UPenn 151, our JHU 195 applications from academia, and thus academia Hopkins and outside Hopkins, industry and startup companies that want to develop new technologies for older adults. That in itself made me very, very, very happy that we are able to have such an impact. And of course, was even more happy that we have much more than UPenn and UMass. So some of examples of the initial pilots that funded. So device to enhance deep sleep in older adults. I want to show you this because this was an internally developed. It went through some of the translation validation, and then it made it, because it was successful, it made it to get a full pilot from the AITC. Robots to assist caregivers through early detection of agitation and behavioral changes. Alexa can see you. Alexa can hear you. Alexa can do much more if you allow it to do more. Creepy, but I think has a future. Balance and gate devices, and of course, this is right at the core of hearing. Virtual reality engagement tools. Social isolation is a big deal for older adults, especially nowadays with COVID and all people stuck at home. Virtual smartphone diagnosis of cataract, very, very interesting way to use AI to diagnose cataract using a cell phone. And then I programmed in the immersive department developed to identify high-risk older adults. A few of those, this is an AI-based facial expression analysis software, and that it is integrated with an autonomous navigating robot that will visit nursing homes and detect agitation. So you can imagine this thing moving around and just seeing people around and detecting agitation. So I'll tell you a little bit more about this Sequoia. This is a bot that observes behaviors through the Apple Watch, and it provides fall and wandering alerts. And this is a virtual reality platform. So this is our artificial intelligence and technology collaboratory. I'll move to the Gerotech Incubators program, but before I confuse you, the AITC is meant to sponsor research nationwide for faculty or companies from academia. Go to the grassroots students, because I believe that our students are the best students. The Gerotech Incubators program is meant to bring students from 4 schools: School of Medicine, Carey Business School, School of Engineering, and the Nursing School, to form motor units working together to develop technology. So you can see the difference between the two. AITC is more for developed technologies. Gerotech is meant for students that have interest in working in aging, and then put them to work together in teams and come up with a technology for older adults. We have some thematic areas, including fall prevention, remote monitoring, and those more of a guidance, not really set in concrete. So we are interested in technologies for older adults, but just to help them fall into some of the funding buckets after they develop the technologies, we develop those thematic areas. It's directed by 4 directors from the School of Medicine, myself, School of Engineering, Najim Dehak, School of Nursing, Brian Hansen, Dr. Brian Hansen, and from Carey Business School, Dr. Kevin Frank. And it is funded through the Human Aging Project, the Center for Innovative Medicine, and the School of Engineering. And Hopkins, once they put money on, that they mean business. So this is why I wanted to mention that. Each unit is made of 3 to 5 engineering students, a resident or a student, a medical student, a nursing student, and a business student. And it goes in multiple phases. So the first phase, engineering students working with a medical student and identifying an area they want to work on. But I'll let one of the engineering students tell you about that in a second. And it's mentored by faculty mentors. This is an example of our first team, 5 engineers: Christina, Janice, Summer, Joshua, and Spencer are engineers. Rachel was an Osler resident that worked together to develop this first geotech incubator. And I don't know if the sound will work.
You need to be assessing 4 really main quadrants: the clinical needs, the commercial needs, the technical design and feasibility, and the strategic and organizational structure of the team you're working with, or the financing and resources you have. And so this is my amazing team, comprised of Christina, Janice, Summer, Spencer, and Rachel. And I now like to kind of tell you about the process and our average day when we started working with the Gerotech Incubator Program. So Dr. Abadir and our terrific advisors gave us the opportunity to go into over 20 clinical or nursing sites, from the emergency room, nursing homes, the memory clinic, and so on and so forth, inpatient clinic. And every day, our day would look something like this. We would go in, shadow clinicians, physical therapists, nurses, and jot down a lot of notes and trying to identify problems they were facing or pain points. Then at the end of the day, we would compile all those notes, mind map those solutions, and mind mapping was a process for us to really understand what is going on and really process all the problems we were observing. And it gave us an opportunity to do further research into the field, and also um, gather more insight. Then from mind maps, we would formulate needs. And needs are just a refined way of stating problems so you can design towards that problem in a very, very focused way. And so this is an example of one branch on our crazy mind maps. They would look kind of like roots. So if you can see here, from left to right is the process of us really extracting um, the whys and understanding the root cause behind an issue. So this was from a caregiver interview I had this past summer in the emergency room. In talking to that caregiver, I learned that the caregiver was spending 16 hours a day taking care of his mom, and they were working night shifts in order to keep her out of nursing homes. And they were just so frustrated with the caregiver assistance programs in Maryland that they actually were looking into moving to other states. And so we kept on asking why, and formulated this need that older adults need a way to receive help in their homes in order to prevent hospitalizations and admittance to nursing homes. This is one need of over 200 that we actually developed over the summer as part of the Gerotech Incubator Program. And so where are we now? Out of all those needs, we ended up focusing in on cognitive decline. The memory clinic was one area that we were constantly in and really personally gravitated towards and saw a lot of issues. And specifically, we're focused on enhancing sleep to improve cognition in older adults. And the reason why is sleep in the geriatric population is a complicated issue. It's fragmented, less synchronized, they spend less time in it, and they spend less time specifically in deep sleep, which is the phase of sleep where you feel more restored. In fact, this phase of sleep, deep sleep, or also known as slow wave sleep, is responsible for memory consolidation, hormone regulation, a variety of other physiological factors. And there's a growing body of evidence connecting slow wave sleep to dementias and Alzheimer's. And the current intervention landscape space that we observed while in the memory clinic is there are pharmaceuticals, there's sleep hygiene, and there's other forms of stimulation that weren't very affected. Pharmaceuticals pose a lot of problems because this population's on already a lot of pharmaceuticals, and so you have risks of adverse events. Sleep hygiene doesn't really directly enhance this phase of sleep, and so where we're focused on right now is that project. We're actually prototyping right now. I just want to thank you all so much for the opportunity. I'm going to hand this back to Dr. Abadir to present some of our work. This is a program I'm incredibly passionate about, and I just could not be more honored to be working with this fantastic team. Thank you all so much.
So I wanted to present this to show you that the process itself and that the excitement that you get from working with those engineers. It is interesting that they come to you with chips and wires and you feel like they built something in their garage, but that started with an idea, not seeing a problem. You know, the Dean of School of Engineering said that I want my engineering students that he said that they are the smartest in the country. Whiting School of Engineering is the top engineering school. I want them to go in unpolluted and unrestrained hunt for problems and solutions. Unpolluted, I don't want you to tell them what's wrong. Don't tell them that this is the area that you need to work on. Well, we do sometimes, but unrestrained, don't tell them how to fix it, because quite honestly, if you knew how to fix it, you wouldn't have been in this issue. So really excited to work with those, with the students. And it just, what I was asked once, how much hope do you have in developing those technologies? And I shared a slide that I don't have here. I asked each of the Gerotech incubators to tell me why do they want to work in aging. One of the groups came back with a slide of all the students carrying pictures of their grandparent or grandmother or a loved one. And they said, this is why we're doing this. And I do see a lot of hope in that. When we have students that are that passionate in serving their older adults, I think there's a lot of hope. I'll end up in the last few slides with the in-house studio. So we're building this in-house studio to develop new technologies. And we have machines that are AI equipped to capture signals of aging. And I'll take you through it quickly. So this is working to say that, you know, the old naive thinking of a patient is all brain or all ear or all heart or all muscles is very naive. The person is made of physical, cognitive, and psychosocial, and they all talk to each other, all those systems. So working with Dr. Najim Dehag, Dr. Laureano, and Dr. Chen Lizu, we are building this new lab that allows us to use wearables and non-wearable technologies to assess changes in aging. So I want to show you this. This is the working with also teams from the FDA. And if you don't know, FDA has their own research arm with interest in assessing how fast and picking up on early signs of physical decline in older adults. So this is a mat that allows people, while they walk on it, to be assessed on their walking speed. And not only how fast the person walks, but it gives terabytes of data on hesitations, the gait, the shuffle, where they're pressing, where they're not pressing, their balance, a lot of that. It's equipped with a camera on one side and the other to annotate the physical wearable signals. So you can also see that the future that I want to build for you is that when you go visit your physician, your primary care physician, that there are cameras that are watching how fast the patient moved, listening to the articulation, assessing for hearing, assessing for visual eye movements, and coming up with early prediction of things that can be worked on. When a patient comes with a fall, it's too late to do some stuff. So if there is a way to, in every visit, get a more objective assessment of physical, cognitive, and psychosocial status of our older adults, you end up with an early warning sign and ability to say, I think you should go and see a physical therapist. I think you should go and do a little bit more work with a nutritionist, dietitian. So this is what the future is holding for us. I think AI and engineering technologies will become more and more dominant force in driving our medical healthcare for older adults. And with that, I'll turn it back to Jeremy to highlight a few of the areas that would love to see more of you guys coming and knocking on our door.
Thanks, Peter. So as you can see, we have this great sort of integrated program that stretches from biology to engineering and lots of opportunities. So we just wanted to close and talk about them in a little specificity. So we have a T32 training grant for postdoctoral fellows. So once people have their doctoral degree, they can work in any of these sort of areas that we've talked about today, as long as it's related to translational aging. So we've got fellows who are engineers who are working on physical properties of cells and translating that into new treatments, person working on Alzheimer's disease drug development, people doing chronic inflammation work and new sort of diagnostics in that space, for example. So all kinds of folks can fit in under that umbrella. As Frank mentioned, we have the Older Americans Independence Center, which is facilitates studies related to frailty, but I think Frank, you may have had a pilot at one time or a junior faculty award. And we support ideas in the space related to frailty. So it can really be anything. We have surgeons, we have public health students, we have our fellows too, people from engineering. So a wide variety of people working, as long as it's sort of focused on frailty and either understanding the biology of it or thinking about ways to treat it. And we have a pretty liberal thought process about getting people in and can help formulate those proposals. And there's a fair amount of funding with those, about $30,000 to $50,000 per year. HAP scholarships are more for mid-career faculty. Again, we're trying to foster this kind of big community in spaces that we think will rapidly grow to become programs of their own, big areas, big problem areas that we want to see further developed. And then finally, Peter mentioned the AITC pilot awards and the Gerotech incubators programs. There's lots of resources there. So if anybody's interested in that, we're certainly happy to help facilitate developing of those applications and ideas that you might have into applications. So with that, I will close. It does, as Peter mentioned, it kind of takes this big symphony ensemble to get things together to work on aging. It's definitely not a single instrument effort. There's huge amounts of effort going on across the school. You guys have done amazing work on hearing. But again, we're trying to pull everybody together and think bigger about how to kind of comprehensively solve some of these problems. So thanks for your attention. And
So I'll open up for any questions from the audience first. All right, I'll prime one then, because so Jeremy and Peter, I was out at the Consumer Electronics Show a couple of weeks ago, right? And I learned a new term there, which it really resonated with me. So it's the idea of a digital twin. Have you guys heard of this term? So it's weird. This is the biggest thing. So, as you guys know, CES, the biggest electronics show in the whole world. It's like 20,000 people, 150,000 people there. And there's a whole section around digital health, right? So it was a huge part of the whole CES was around digital health, right? So different sensors for everything, right? So the term that was bandied around that way, I always find this is a disconnect between like what I see on the academic side and I go to Consumer Electronics Show, which is a whole other ballgame. And there was all these booths around digital twins, right? So I was like, what is a digital twin? So the best analogy for a digital twin while I was there, which I thought was really fascinating, sort of one of your thoughts on this, you'll see where I'm going with this, is like, have you guys ever had a saltwater fish tank? No one? So, yeah. So, it's impossible, right? I mean, there are all these variables and your sea anemone dies, you're out like $100 and you're trying to monitor, right? So the analogy for this is like where saltwater tanks have gone the last 15 years since our wife and I tried having one, is now you have all these sensors embedded in the tank that in real time give you everything about the tank, right? right? So you can observe the tank in real time. And because of all these sensors in the digital world, there's a digital twin of this fish tank that allows you to predict things in real time and everything like that, right? So the analogy for a digital twin from the tech space right now is the fact that we have all these sensors, right? So theoretically, if you integrated all the sensors across different platforms in the digital space, you have a digital twin of yourself that's monitoring all these parameters yourself in real time that can potentially allow for a far greater degree of being called prediction or anticipation of things that happen before they happen, right? But the one thing that comes up in all these talks on digital twins at CES though is interoperability, right? So everyone has their own platform. You know, you can measure hearing something, you can measure your steps with this thing, you can measure you can measure voice, but they're always platforms that don't fully integrate into a true digital twin, right? So have you guys seen any in the application so far? You talk about interoperability. Anything around their thoughts there? Because I think that is the holy grail in many ways, a true digital twin that allows for the digitization of what you, and I'll get one other side briefly, and then I'm pandering around a little bit. But so I think about caregivers I know I like, with my wife is a caregiver for her parents, and my mother is a caregiver for her, like 100-year-old grandmother, right? And the one thing I've noticed is that they are extremely sensitive. They notice things before they happen. And it's because they integrate, as like humans do, we integrate all these different signals that they have. They see how they behave, what they're talking about, and they're integrating, they're predicting in real time on a human level, right? So where is that going in the AITC space of the digitization, digital health and prediction? I mean, is there anything about AITC around that now, or just general thoughts? It was the biggest paper I got from the CES show, and how that's a huge hurdle.
I'm both coming up comments.
Good luck with that one.
So I don't have a great answer to that. And I'll tell you that we struggled with the different systems because, for example, some of those monitors and signals will not allow you to work on. So one of the main criteria for us to work on a technology that it allows us access to their platform so that we can build it and integrate it with the others. You will see quickly that there are companies that are more interested in games. Some are interested in hearing. Some are interested in heart monitoring. And we do believe that to create that digital twin, you need to be able to have all systems talk to each other. It's not a person cannot be just seen as just gates. And facial expression can be motor and can be psychosocial also. So there, in our attempts at working here, and this is where Chris Shoot becomes really critical, is that all data has to be integrated in one platform that we have access to and that speaks the same language, so that eventually what we would love to have is like a dashboard that incorporates all of this, because a clinician will not look at every different things. It needs to give that a whole sum of that person, as you see the person sitting in front of me, and you can tell what's going on with them. So that's the first part, and I'll let Jeremy also comment on that. But in terms of early prediction, one of the key features, yes, once you start having some thoughts, and this happens really early in our patients, right? They start to see that I'm not as I used to be. I was able to do a little bit more. I will argue, Frank, that this is already, you started to see some of those impact of aging already. There is a stage like the figure that Jeremy showed before this becomes evident and before the patients have those subjective feeling, what they call it, that the subjective feeling of weakness. Although when you test them, they are not the subjective cognitive deficit. But I do believe that the computer can see much more than that. And you have seen some of those. Next time you invite us, I can show some of the videos of the computer assessment of neurocognitive function.
Yeah.
A clock is not the clock drawing that we use for memory testing. Clinicians will just look at 2 or 3 things. Computer can see trillions of things in that. It can see the hesitations, the shivering in the hand. So the simple test that gives you 1 or 2 things can be seen early on, so that early signs that even if the patients didn't notice it yet can be observed a lot earlier. Is there a value for that? I do believe that there is a value for that, because this is the time that you still have reserve that can be improved and worked on before the damage. There is a say that at the end of the journey, all dementias look the same, right? So the trick is, how early can we do the prediction? So that digital studio is more meant for that early warning and prediction. When I presented it before with Jeremy, people cringed when they thought about a camera watching them.
Yeah.
But you have to think about it from the healthcare aspect. This is an opportunity to intervene.
Yeah, the platform I think is a great idea. It's not, we haven't seen anything come across that on our desks. One of the things we've tried to do in the Human Aging Project, we have a sort of a aging exam that is supposed to capture a lot of biology data.
Yeah.
As well as some of this integrated data that Peter talked about in the suite. So at some point, you know, in conjunction with clinical judgment, hopefully we're going to be able to merge that kind of data into something like a digital twin, but having a lot more sort of diagnostic stuff with it. So I do think Chris Shute in our program has thought a lot about integrating data, and hopefully we'll be able to do that. Yeah, go ahead.
I'll give my microphone. Sorry.
That was awesome. I almost feel like going to my office and placing a sign closed because of lack of knowledge. So I have a question. You know, most of the data that you use are observational, right? So I think part of the problem is that, my opinion, because you can plug a lot. I don't know much about artificial intelligence, but you know, it uses data that are available, right? And a lot of that data, those data are observational. So in epidemiology, I'm an epidemiologist. In epidemiology, of course, you use randomized trials to get around the limitations of observational data, or you use study designs that try to mimic randomized data, such as Mendelian randomization, instrumental variables.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And back to the sort of made me think about our resiliency studies, where you often don't see any changes until you're actually putting a person under some kind of stress, and then you see these perturbations in the system. So we're, you know, like Peter mentioned, the motion capture, you know, like the differences between moving and sitting still, you see a huge amount of variability. And so, you know, incorporating things like what you're talking about into that. I mean, it may not be a drug trial, but it'll be some kind of difference in the way people are moving, or the way they're stating some sentences, for example. So thanks.
So I have a sort of question, sort of thought. So I guess I have a feeling that in this kind of artificial intelligence sort of context, it would be really important to validate the results, right? And sort of the thoughts on, you're talking about different kind of industries, fields, having the same language, being in a part of the whole system thing, but they might have different levels of validation in them, right? Because they have different variabilities, and different technologies in different fields will have like on a different level, right? How is that dealt with if we are validating it using different methods and they're on a different level of validation?
So so I can't agree more. And I think that the key of understanding the system is that we are a really close to observation center. So each of those hand-picked pilots, we pick them based on novelty of the idea, innovation, the implementation of AI, but also this is why we have a clinician working, or a clinician researcher working with the engineers. So the validation part is part of their application, the milestones that they will set. We have a very close monitoring progress reports that are spaced, where we are closely watching how they are developing the technologies and providing direct feedback. This is the another deviation from the NIA's standards. You get a grant and then in 5 years, you submit a yearly progress report. We're really talking to them. We meet with them. We discuss the progress of the project. We provide them with ideas. We put them in contact with other people that can change their technologies or validate the technology a little bit better. So I think that, but when you start talking about validation, have you guys played with ChatGPT before? Okay, have you tried to ask it to write something? Writes awesome.
Wrote
Right.
a letter to Santa.
Yeah.
It's very helpful.
It actually writes awesome and you feel like it's writing wonderful. And then you go through it and you find that it was actually, a lot of it are not entirely true or validated or anything. So that's again, a sign. AI is developed by humans, right? And you can trust AI as much as you can trust humans. You always have to validate. You always have to ask the question, where did the system get this information from? It could be an opinion of a person that wrote it on something. So that definitely is part of our monitoring and milestones of watching how we use AI for the future.
I think the mics will pick them up. I don't know where to pass. Good.
Oh, okay. Maybe one last question is coming on time, but Jennifer, will you have the?
Thank you, Seth. So there's a question from online. And so you mentioned that Nancy and Thomas are running kind of a stakeholders group as part of this project. And there was just a question about which stakeholders are involved with that.
So depends on the project. So imagine we have a virtual reality headset that a company is awarded a pilot for, and we're going to use that to use a stakeholder group to sort of test out the headset to see its comfortability, to see if they would actually use it, to kind of inform the company about the directions where people would actually use it. So that would be a group of people, in their probably 70s and 80s that would come in, living in the community. And would come in for that. So they're going to kind of pull people together depending on the individual project. So it could be people who use walkers, for example, or have a lot of falling. So they'll pull in 5 to 10 people probably each time for that. We also have a rural arm to this. So one of the big pushes of this AITC was to help underserved populations get better access to healthcare and work in the space. So there's a consortium in Iowa that we use, and they'll also bring rural stakeholders into that, and then also urban dwellers who might benefit from things. So that was a long answer. All kinds of stakeholders, mostly older adults, but also maybe caregivers, younger family members that are taking care of older adults.
They have constructed a full advisory board kind of thing for themselves that represents different sects. But for each project, they also go and recruit more of the key stakeholders.
We have a registry through the Pepper Center with about 600 people in it. People over the age of 65 who've signed consents to be in studies of any kind related to aging. So we can pull from that pool. There's a specific demographic. We need 85-year-olds who live in a retirement community. We can identify them and try to bring them in, at least contact them and have them come.
Thank you.
So we reached the end where I've gone a little over. So I want to thank Jeremy and Peter again. Sign off now. The trainees, you guys will be meeting with Jeremy and Peter right afterwards again, and I would use that time wisely. I mentioned between Jeremy and Peter, they sort of, I think, godfathers of, I would say, anything geroscience, aging related. So as you know, good science is always about pulling together the right people. So they'll be able to point you guys in the right directions if you have any questions about where to go next.
Thanks.
Thanks.